Thank you for listening to the Kyle and Tim podcast, where we have authentic conversations that help cultivate a better understanding of ourselves, our guests, and the world we live in. This podcast is about our guests, getting to know them, their backgrounds, experiences, thoughts, and ideas. We really appreciate you listening. Before we introduce our next guest, we'd like to introduce a few of our sponsors that help make this podcast possible.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Mountain Mule Transportation, located here in Bozeman, Montana. Mountain Mule is a private SUV and truck service, offering chauffeur services in all of southwest Montana. Whether it's your next skiing, hunting, or fishing trip, early morning or late night trips to and from Bozeman Airport, as well as weddings and private parties. No matter the occasion, Mountain Mule will get you there safely and on time. To learn more, visit mountain-mule.com and book today.
Hi, welcome to the Kyle and Tim podcast. Today's guest is me. I'm Carol Mitch. And today we talked about
where you grew up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Talked about some travels that I did.
Yeah.
And
Japan, Mexico, Alaska,
India. And raising my family, homeschooling.
Yeah. Thanks, Carol. Enjoy, folks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Carol, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
I'm from Pennsylvania.
Whereabouts?
Butler, Pennsylvania. It's now become famous.
Why is that?
Trump was shot there.
Oh, is that okay?
Mm-hmm,
Okay, got it. So it's become famous, but we don't know it.
I also didn't know.
But before that, what was Butler like?
So Butler is, it used to have 4 steel mills in it. So it's a blue collar town, a lot of brick construction.
Okay.
It's in the Appalachian Mountains, so it's pretty hilly, pretty forested. Yeah. So
where in the state does that lie?
Oh, it's north of Pittsburgh, between Erie and Pittsburgh. So 45 minutes north. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think where I grew up is probably about 9 hours from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the name of the?
Millbrook is the name of the town in upstate New York.
Yeah.
It's not in PA. But I don't know. We were in eastern PA enough for farm cow related stuff, just because the agriculture is pretty big in that side of the state.
But that part of New York is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably pretty similar to eastern PA too. Very like rolling hills and green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm from Western Pennsylvania.
So what was life like there?
So the little town that I grew up in was pretty unique. It was almost everybody was Catholic, and there was a seminary that was in that little village, and the church that was built there. My parents were the first people to be married in it.
Oh wow!
And it was just built on the same site as the previous church. The grade school that I went to was the same one that my grandmother went to. And I could see the house where my mom was born from the house I grew up in. And
this is Butler or just outside of Butler?
It's a little town called Herman, which is right outside of Butler. And so to go to high school, for example, you'd have to go into Butler.
Okay.
But it was only like 15 minutes, But it's like I, for example, I have 52 first cousins. And so like my grandmother's house was within walking distance, and like on Sundays, tons of aunts and uncles and cousins would just converge on her house. And when I went to school, a lot of my classmates were cousins, and so it's a town where people know each other really well and have strong roots. So it was a good place to grow up.
Do you know the population of that town?
I don't. And it's changed quite a bit now too. The seminary has since closed as that function, and it's actually now like a reform school. And the grade school has closed down, and the church is probably going to close down. So it's really the personality of the town has changed considerably.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that's totally off topic, but I just thought of it because I'll tell you what I thought of it after I ask you. Where did the name Time come from?
Oh, thanks for asking, because it's actually his dad is named Barry, and Barry Flanagan, and Barry was named after his uncle Barry Tyne. And the year that Tyne was born, Uncle Barry's wife passed away, unfortunately, early of cancer.
Okay.
And it was a way to honor that family.
Okay.
And so that's that family's last name.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to ask, because I was going to say, Tyne mentioned you were is it the youngest of 7?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you've got 52 first cousins. So there's 52 kids between your 6 siblings. Is that?
No, that would be nieces and nephews. So
Okay.
it's that my mom was like one of 11
Oh, okay.
kids or
So
so.
yeah.
And then
All
each one of them had at least 5 kids. And, so, and then my dad, of course, he had a smaller family that he came from, but just all those cousins
I gotcha.
together.
Yeah, I was off a
Okay.
generation
Yeah.
with my.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's memorable from growing up there with your siblings? So you're the youngest, right?
Yeah, I'm the youngest. So my grandmother's property, which was within walking distance, and it was sort of that classic, like over the river and through the woods kind of, it was just through the woods, not over the river, but she had beautiful 10 acres with a pond, and the pond was big enough to have an island. And, she was widowed by the time I was born, and it was always, we were always really welcome. So you could be independent, like walking to her house, getting there. She's always very happy to see you. And just spent a lot of time. Oftentimes you'd run into a cousin that's down there. And so you spend.
And this is your grandmother?
My grandmother.
Yep.
So then you'd, spend time swimming in the pond or helping her maintain her property or like her woods or cutting grass with her. And so anyway, that's a really big memory. And I also am of the generation where you just had to be home by dark. You know what I mean? And at the time, there were a lot of woods around. And so just with brothers or neighborhood kids, we'd be out in the woods building forts and, playing kick the can and doing that kind of stuff. And so there was a lot of freedom. I think it's a really different parenting style than you find nowadays. So anyway, that's what it was like.
What would the term for that type of kid? Like a feral kid, almost? Because you're just sort of running wild.
Kind of, but I think that we weren't too feral in that. I think there were always reports going around, like, if you do something mischievous at somebody's house, that mom is calling your mom,
Yeah.
and by the time you walk in the front door, your mom's talking to you about it,
Yeah.
So we were,
you were always being watched by somebody.
kind of. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've also heard the term latchkey kids, and I don't know if that's.
No, I think that means a kid that comes home and there's not somebody there to greet them.
Okay.
So you have your own key to the house, right? But my mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
And so she was always there. And she actually, she's a kind of a unique person in that she never learned to drive. She did not know how to swim, and she didn't ride a bicycle. And so she was very content in her life, but that had a bit of an impact on our lives. So, for example, when I can swim and bike and do all these kind of things,
you're super independent.
She was really impressed. She was like, wow, Carol, you can do anything. Like, and so really you're just doing the basic things because there are things that she never did. She really admired that,
Yeah.
And the other way that it was impactful was that since my dad was the one who worked and who also drove, it just limited like outside lessons that you're going to get. Like if your neighbor can't give you that lesson in piano or art or whatever it was, you weren't going to be going there because you really didn't have the transportation, or it just really wasn't worth adding that on to my dad's day, to do that. So anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. That generation, there was a lot of people that didn't know how to swim.
Right.
My grandmother didn't know how to swim, and one of my grandfathers didn't know how to swim either.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I think I have that right. My grandmother definitely didn't know how to swim.
Yeah.
My grandfather, maybe he just, as he got older, he became really uncomfortable with it, but maybe that's where anyway, that generation, a lot of people didn't know how to swim.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably more common that some people didn't have a driver's license and couldn't drive. There's probably a lot of people who also drove without driver's license.
Right.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on what you never know what that era of people were going through. So learning how to swim might seem like, why even take that risk after all the risks? You might have gone through the Great Depression and everything. And it's.
Yeah. And I can kind of imagine there was a lot of, it was good natured, but like roughhousing. And she had a lot of brothers. And even though they had a pond on their property, I can see probably there being like a lot of commotion when her brothers are in that pond swimming and like, pushing each other off the raft and that kind of stuff. And it probably being a little bit much for her, and so maybe just not putting the time in to learn how to swim just because maybe it never felt safe. I don't know.
Sure.
What did your dad do?
So he's a really interesting person. He was born in 1919, and he graduated as a valedictorian of his class. He was going to be a priest, and so he joined the seminary. But from a childhood accident, he was blind in one eye. And at that time, the church had enough men applying to be priests that they could afford to be a little more
picky.
And so this is my understanding of it, that when the priest is at the altar and he's reading from the Bible, if it was my dad, he'd have to turn his head like this to see the page. And they said that was a disqualifier, which is kind of shocking. So then he was just a brother, and he was a cook for a lot of years. And I think he just grew disenchanted in his early 30s.
What's a brother?
He was sort of like a sub priest.
He's a homie.
You can't, but like, for example, you couldn't say mass, those kind of things, but you couldn't be like an aide to the priest. And
so that still kept him involved.
Yeah, I mean, he wore the whole brown robe with the rope and the knots tied, and he did that whole thing. But I think another thing that had happened during the time that he was a brother was that he had a brother who committed suicide, and he wasn't that. At that time, the church considered that to be like a terrible sin, like one where your soul would be condemned to hell, and he wasn't allowed to go to that funeral. And I think that was like a bit of a, so I think there were like different things. And I think also his experience of just the amount of ego that he witnessed, was disturbing, those kind of things. And so anyway, he didn't really talk about it a lot, but in his 30s, he decided to stop that. And so he came back to Butler, and then he met my mom, and they got married. And so he really had like two lives. So he got married, I think he was 36, and then he went on to have 7 kids. So for work, he did.
That was quite the U-turn.
Oh yeah. I mean, like the biggest surprise you wouldn't expect in life. Right. And he was a really nice dad. He was very patient and calm and super dependable. But during my lifetime, his career, he worked in the Social Security office. So he was like a guy at the desk that you go in when you have questions about Social Security, and he would be the person you talk to get those things straightened out.
When you say dependable, what comes to mind?
So, like, for example, my parents built our house. It was a ranch style house with a basement, and it had a coal burning furnace in the basement. And I just remember as a little girl laying in bed, and it's cold, in the morning when you wake up, and I could just hear my dad going down into the cellar and opening that coal bin and shoveling out the coal, and like opening the furnace door, shoveling that in, shaking down the ashes, like those kind of comforting sounds, like, oh, now the house is going to get warm, And then he worked 5 days a week.
I don't even know what that sounds like. Nobody knows what that sounds like anymore.
Yeah, it was actually so nice. And like, honestly, like things that I myself would have hard time with, like working 5 days a week. And then because you're the one with the driver's license on Saturdays, you're going to get the groceries. And because you have 7 kids and, like a job, like working in an office, you're cutting coupons. And like, I would remember just like seeing him cut coupons at the kitchen table on evenings, and then on Saturday, going to 4 or 5 grocery stores to get the best deals, and then on Sunday, going to church, and just always being pleasant. He really helped take care of my grandmother's house, which also had a coal furnace, what I mean? But he was the guy who like get up early to get our house warm, get ready for work. And then on the way to work, stop at my grandmother's house, get her house warm for the day, just very, just calm and dependable.
That's probably being dependable at that time in the, when would that be? Like
Well, I grew up in the 70s.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Like that's probably such an admirable trait for a father and a husband.
It was so nice. Yeah.
Would that have been late to have kids at 36 for like?
Oh yeah.
Because most people probably then you're having kids like when you're 20, right?
Yeah, so he was 50 when I was born.
Okay.
But
yeah.
that's, also has to do with being Catholic. So,
Yeah.
right. You get to like some bonus kids.
Sure. All right. So what, you kind of described a little bit like, you had a lot of freedom as a child. What are some of your memories in like middle school or high school?
Well, a couple of memories that ended up having pretty big impact on my later life was I went to a Catholic grade school, and my second grade teacher was a nun. Her name was Sister Corrine. And I really had this fantastic, I mean, just loved her and really had a nice impression of her. And every week when we would talk about, it was be religion class, she would always bring up Mother Teresa. Do you know who she is?
Mm-hmm.
As an example of somebody who really like lived the faith. And I remember at that time thinking, oh, when I grow up, if I can, I'm going to try to go work with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a thought that I would have off and on through the years. And then anyway, after I graduated from college, I was able to go do that. And another thing that I really remember from grade school was I think we were in fourth grade, and there was a high school girl who came to our school to talk about, she had been an AFS exchange student and she had gone to Argentina. And so she brought some souvenirs that she had brought back from the year abroad, and just talking about living with a different family, speaking a different language and a different culture. And I remember like filing that away too, like, oh man, if I have the opportunity to do something like that, I would like to do something like that. So in high school, I applied, and then I was an exchange student through AFS to Japan. And so I lived in Japan for a year.
AFS is like an American
Field Service, it's called.
And
it was founded after, during World War II, there were American ambulance crews in France. And of course, you would just see so much carnage, right? Like in your daily work. And they kind of got together after the war and said, what can we do to help prevent this from happening again? And they thought, well, if people around the world knew each other and realized all their similarities, maybe that would help to stop wars from happening. And so they founded this American Field Service. And so it's an exchange.
It's still around?
Oh, yeah. Actually, in fact, we hosted a student from Thailand when Tyne was, I guess he was probably a freshman in college here. But we had an exchange student from that group. But anyway, so I spent a year in Japan in high school. So
where in Japan?
So if you're familiar with Japan, the main island is called Honshu, and Tokyo is about midway down Honshu on the eastern side. And if you went across the island on the western side, they called it like the country, although it was like much bigger than any place I had ever been up to that point. It's called Fukui.
Okay.
Yeah. So I lived with a family there, and for the first time I was a big sister. I had 3 little brothers, and so spent a year doing that.
That's awesome. What was Catholic grade school like? What were some of your memories? What was the experience like?
Yeah. So by the time I was a student there, so for example, next to the grade school, there was a convent, and that convent is just for nuns to live in. And it probably has, I don't know, I would say 6 or 7 bedrooms. But at the time I was a student, there was maybe 2 nuns only in it. Like, vocations to be a nun or a priest have really dropped off. And in addition to that, the other thing that changed a lot was after Vatican II, nuns started like not wearing the habit, but they could wear like clothes like I'm wearing, and they might not wear a veil. They might start wearing earrings. Like they really just became more like a regular looking person. So I think it was a much different experience that I had than that even my older brothers and sisters had, when there was like a lot more nuns wearing habits teaching, or very different than when my mother had, So I had a positive experience. I never experienced, that's pretty famous, like just the Catholic guilt or fear. I actually feel like I've never had that. I always felt, I feel like the message that was given to me was that you are loved by God and you're a child of God, and that our job is to love one another as God would. You know what I mean? Like that was his message. So it was a pretty positive experience for me, but I know that it's not that for everybody.
Sure. Do you think that maybe your parents kind of and the way they treated you had something to do with that?
Oh, you mean that message?
Yeah. That like,
yeah.
because a message like, I guess what I'm thinking is, let's just say you take two people in the room and you say one message to Tim and one message to me. Let's just say it's the exact same message, but I had a bad day or something and Tim had a great day.
Yeah.
We may receive that message differently. And so I was just curious about like, I wonder if your experience had something to do with the way you were just treated by your family.
Yeah, I think I think a thing that is noteworthy about both my parents is I think they would really, and I think nowadays they would call it like speaking life into a person, but basically they would praise you, even if it was like a crosstalk, like say my mom's friend is over. She's gonna like brag on me within my hearing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that she know, like, oh, like I kind of know, like, oh, she likes it when I do this or do that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I think that, and every time, even from the time, like I witnessed it, like when I had little nieces and nephews, to see how my parents interact with them, and like they refer to like little children as sunshine and those kind of things. Like you wouldn't catch them ever saying a negative thing about a child. You know what I mean? And so I think that's a pretty nice way to grow up. You know what I mean? That they're always like pulling those good things out of you.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wonder if what you're kind of asking is your sort of lens of viewing the world is so much more positive because of your parents' impact.
Oh,
no doubt. He was asking if it was.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Yeah.
I mean, or if you're someone who goes to a Catholic school and then come home and your parents are really rough on you and enforcing everything, you might like point fingers at the religion, and to an extent it could be that, but a lot of it could kind of be the backdrop of your caregivers and the way you perceive the world. Is that sort of what you're asking?
Yeah.
What's the age gap between you and the oldest sibling?
There's 11 years.
Okay.
And there's one set of twins.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you know, I don't know how close you are with any of them. What was their experience with being raised that way or going to school that way?
Yeah, I'd say for sure for us three youngest. So the next older than me are twin boys, and they're 18 months older than me. They were one grade ahead. I think they had a pretty positive experience. I think that some of my older siblings had maybe teachers that, for one reason or another, seemed to pick on them. And I think at that time, the way that parents handled that was to maybe console the child, but to keep backing up the teacher. Like, I don't think they would pull you out of school or even consider switching schools or something like that. So I do know that a couple of my siblings had some pretty hard years because of conflicts with teachers. But yeah, I mean, and then it's also hard to sort out like birth order and, maybe how your parents get more and more relaxed as time goes by, and maybe the beneficiary of that when you're the last person born, and, it's hard to sort everything out.
Sure. Yeah. And like what was their stress level and what was their economic situation with older, middle, younger kids, and as things change.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You really probably are in theory, in the best place being the youngest child, because the parents are probably the most well off financially, and then they're very, very seasoned raising
they're kind of relaxed
infants, and they're just
yeah.
And they probably got helpers by that time because the oldest siblings
definitely.
are
Right. Yeah. And then I think I had like a little bit less focus on me because my twin brothers were just 18 months older, and they were like just so cute, and they were kind of like little rascals, and you know what I mean? Like they would, there would be always like stories about them, you know what I mean? And so I think typically the youngest might get like a really big disproportionate share of attention. But I think just it so happens, just because the twin brothers were close in age and just a little older, that kind of spread that out, which was probably good.
Yeah.
To backtrack a little bit, when you were that exchange student, you did that in high school? What did you learn from that, being out of the country and being with that family?
Yeah. It was a really different experience for me. So that family was pretty well off and very well educated. and very academic. And the high school that and it's kind of famous, but in Japan, you also go to school on Saturday, right? So, and when I went there, of course, I was illiterate, which I would remain illiterate because even if you're Japanese, it takes until 5th grade that you could read the newspaper, that you can learn all those characters. And just the way the school system was, there was 50 students in a classroom. And it's very different than American high school. Like there was a heater at the front of the classroom, and that was the only heat in that room. So if you were in the front of the classroom, you were cooking, and if you're in the back of the classroom, you're cold. At lunchtime, they just pushed their desks together and ate. The whole year I was there, I never once saw a student raise their hand to ask a question. It was only lecture style. But anyway, the year I was there, so anyway, when you're illiterate, like you can't, I couldn't read their textbooks. And so I just studied Japanese. And after I had been there a couple of weeks, my host parents, who were well-educated, and they were very accommodating, they would be like pulling out their dictionary to find words in English to talk to me in English. And I kind of realized like, oh, if this keeps up, their English is going to be really good in a year and I won't speak Japanese. So I just decided, I'm not going to speak English anymore. And I remember it was like I was there for 2 weeks. I was up in my room and I worked out that sentence to be able to say, I'm not speaking English anymore. So then I came down to breakfast, and in Japanese, I said, I'm not speaking English anymore. And I know my host mother was like, what? And it did end up in some pretty big confusions, and things that were difficult for me about that was, when you're learning a language, you learn lots of nouns and you learn some verbs, but maybe you don't have the tenses correct. And for months and months, I felt like anytime I talked, I just sounded like an imbecile.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could only express the most basic ideas. You couldn't have a conversation on a deep level at all. So, of course, the students I went to school with were friendly, but you couldn't become like really close with them because your language is so limited. And so I learned to study well. That was one thing. But I also was homesick a tremendous amount. I was homesick just for people that I could communicate with easily.
Mm-hmm.
I was homesick for the outdoors. There in the part that we lived in Japan, it was hard to find a natural place outdoors. It was either, like housing or stores, or it was rice fields until you got to a mountain,
Mm-hmm.
So it was just hard to get out in the woods, get by yourself. So I think that having gone through those experiences of pretty extreme loneliness, it helped me later when I decided to do lots of things on my own. I almost like had a buffer there, like how are you going to handle being away from everything familiar and everybody familiar? You know what I mean? Like it was painful, but I felt like I grew in that way. So anyway.
You were there for a full calendar year?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I felt like around 9 months, I felt like I finally could speak at a little bit of a deeper level and kind of make up for some lost time, But anyway. But the family I was with, they were really great. They, I think they could see, what a struggle that would be. And they themselves were quite active. But, when I would go home from school, we'd go running, we'd go to the Y and go swimming. There was always something physical to do. And I think that was just really helpful emotionally, just to have something to do that you feel like you're good at and that get those endorphins going. And so
you were doing that in Japan?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
How much contact could you have with home?
So that when I was there, that was like 1987. And at that time, of course, there wasn't the internet. International phone calls were so expensive that I think we only talked 3 times the whole year on the phone, and it was limited. It was like a 10-minute phone call because we were budgeting for this, And then when you would send a letter, it took 2 weeks to get one way.
Yeah.
And then if somebody was going to respond to something that you wrote, of course, it's another 2 weeks. So maybe 4 weeks between, if you really were trying to have a conversation about something in particular.
Yeah.
So it took a long time, but it was always great to get mail. for sure.
Yeah, you were excited about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And how old were you then?
I was 17 and then I turned 18 when I was there.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It was a great experience.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
What did you what do you remember about Japanese culture
I think
at the time?
Yeah. I guess things that they have a saying that they say a lot. It's "gambarimasu," and it means keep trying, keep it up, and they say it the same way that you and I would say, like, "Hey, what's up?" You know what I mean? But it's always like encouraging people, like, keep after it, you know. And the other thing that was kind of unique and different, I thought, was that any blemish that an individual might have really reflected on their family. So, for example. Like there was just a lot of pressure. Like in junior high school, you take a test that determines what kind of a high school you're going to go to. So if you're cerebral, you're going to get into this high academic. It's almost like a high school for only AP classes, you know, and they'd have high school for VOTEC or whatever. Yep. And so one of my younger brothers was a junior high school student, and there was I remember just a lot of tears and frustration because the parents were very academic, and that boy, he grew up to be a contractor, but that wasn't the expected path. And but he was getting ready to take these tests that were going to determine his future, you know. And then depending on the high school you went to, you're wearing that uniform. And so when you're leaving, you walk to high school because everything's close enough to walk, but you go out and the neighbors can see right away, like, oh, their kid got into the really great high school. Oh, their kid's going to whatever, the blue collar high school or whatever it was, you know. And so there's like some status and pressure. Yep. And if you do something embarrassing, that's considered bad for the whole family, you know. So there's a lot of, I guess maybe group mentality that has its pros and cons, you know.
Sure. Yeah, it almost seems like shame based in some.
Yeah, in some ways.
Sounds brutal.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was also, I just remember when I came back, I had, I almost like a more self-discipline, like more awareness of like physical fitness and just like choices that I'm making and time that I'm putting in for studying, those kind of things. Like it had some good effects on me for sure.
Like you were thinking about your actions.
Yeah. And a question that I had so with AFS, you could ask for a region of the world. You know, you could say, I'd like to go to Europe, or I'd like to go to Africa or Asia or whatever. And I wanted to choose someplace as different as possible because I kind of wanted to see like, who am I, or who are people in spite of maybe the culture that they're in, but like sort of what's your essence and like, who are you, right? So I was kind of curious to go to like a non-Christian environment and like see like, oh, and maybe a lot of the things that I grew up thinking were maybe strictly Christian attributes, like kindness or forgiveness or those kind of things, like how related or how connected was that to faith, you know? So I went to a really Buddhist country.
So you were thinking this at 17 years old of like,
oh yeah,
let me put myself in a situation that's so different that I find out who I really am.
Yeah. And actually I had asked like if I could go even to like an Asian country, and I actually really wanted to live in a really poor place because I wanted to see like, am I a pleasant person because I'm so comfortable? You know what I mean? Can I be pleasant if I'm less comfortable? If I had to sleep on a mat, or if there was whatever bugs in my house, or like that kind of thing, or a very bland diet, like, can I still be a nice person, but of course they're not, if you look at like the adults that are running the program, there's no way they're going to send a high school student
to Cambodia.
Yeah, there's no way. Well, that was my vision. I was like, oh, let me do that. But no, I went to a place that, it was safe. My economic group rose quite a bit to the house I landed in, Yeah. But I think I did learn that, there's a lot of kindness, a lot of patience, and a lot of love, whatever religion people are in, or maybe even not in a religion. But that's the kind of way that we help societies to work, is to have all those traits.
Yeah, I was thinking two things. The reason I say it seems brutal, I say that because I just know like there's so much diversity in me and my other three siblings and kind of like career paths.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you were someone that just did not have academic leanings,
Right.
to have your sort of self-worth measured and shamed,
yeah,
that's just where I could see it being brutal.
Yeah, I
in
see
that
what
sense.
you're saying.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, but it could also, in the same way, like teach you to strive for more and be more. But if it's the opposite of what you
Yeah, I
want
think
to
in
do,
his case, it was just frustrating. And I remember he was a really good cartoonist. And I thought, my God, if he grew up in my house, my parents would have been bragging him all the time.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? He had some really great traits and talents, but they just weren't the ones that that particular house was looking for at the time, you know?
Mhm.
So,
The other thought I had is, as far as connecting with people, or you're saying you couldn't really have a deep conversation.
oh, yeah.
I almost wondered if, you know, the way people can connect with animals,
Mhm.
which they don't speak the language, if there was any way to sort of have that, like if there were certain people that you just felt a rapport emotionally, or if it was too distanced with the culture and language barrier.
Yeah. I got really close to both of my host parents. And there was maybe one of the other students in my high school that I felt like a close kinship to. And that was almost like a feeling of somebody's spirit, you know? But, um, but with her, that's as far as it got. Like almost like it's just a person you know that you really like that person, you know,
Almost
but you still can't.
like intuitive or something.
Yeah.
Just there's
Yeah.
some sort of,
Yes. Mhm.
yeah. That must have been cool though. That sounds.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was really a very good experience. Mhm. I was a little worried about going, just given the history of World War II. You know, I didn't know how it would be to be an American there. But I guess in my experience, I think really life in Japan got so much better post World War II for Japanese people. Like, you know what I mean? Like their standard of living really went through the roof, and they don't really dwell on World War II at all. So I even went to Nagasaki when I was there, and I was pretty nervous about that, you know. But I never got the feeling of like a
Resentment.
like a personal, yeah, like holding me accountable as an American for any past history,
Sure.
you know, between our two countries. Mm-hmm.
What did the first day back in the U.S. feel like?
Well, I know that I couldn't stop bowing.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
that was
funny.
kind of funny. Yeah.
That's funny. Because that's like saying hi.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like a wave almost.
Right. Yeah. It was be considered very impolite not to, you know, and so,
So
I
you're
was just I was bowing.
it would probably take you weeks to like stop bowing.
Yeah. And
that's so funny.
And of course, you know, I used to have a strong Pittsburgh accent, and I don't have that anymore. And my mom really thought that my way of speaking English, I think just the cadence had changed a lot from speaking Japanese for a year, you know. There were a lot of things that were happening culturally that I had no idea that people were saying, like, I don't know if you ever heard the saying, like, "Where's the beef?"
Yeah, I've heard
so that came from, I think, a Wendy's commercial that was on TV that year that I had just completely missed.
Yeah.
But there were like certain things that when I came back that were common knowledge that I just had no idea.
You're catching up on like all the pop culture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then so I had opted to drop back a year in high school because the Japanese school year ran from March to March. And so that's when I was gone. And I would have come back March my senior year. And I wanted to, I recognize that I missed a year of like math and science and all that really. And so I dropped back a year. And one thing that really made a big impression on me was, I think that first semester back, I got a 4.2, first time in my life. And it was because I couldn't believe it. Like I would take a history textbook and I could read and understand every word. And if I couldn't, could look it up and then I could understand the definition. I was like, wow, it's almost like somebody shouting the answers to you. Like it was so easy. It was like when you're sick and then you're healthy again, you can really notice the health. It was like my mind had been,
it was on overdrive, working so hard. And then after that, it was really easy.
It was so easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it made really a big appreciation.
That's really interesting if you think about that. Because that can apply in so many places in life.
Yeah.
Where you're in a situation where you have to really, really, really work super hard at something.
Yeah.
And then it becomes easy after that.
Yeah.
Then it becomes, and then your mind can get lazy again.
Yeah, it did.
And and then you just revert back,
Yeah,
so
you
I guess you got
forget.
to go to Japan again.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, there's a saying, it's for, I guess, just for people in general, the worst thing you know is the worst thing you know.
oh yeah.
And you just, like, you don't know any,
Yeah.
like, you can't, there's no way you can experience anything harder than the worst thing you've ever experienced.
Yeah.
So yours probably doubled
Yeah.
in a year.
Right.
So then you come back like, wow, this is
It's nothing.
So easy.
Yeah. Right.
for our gym going MMA audience. It's
Yeah, I
like,
mean, well, that, or like think about like your you could take it in a different example, but like, your dad had all these things to do, right? And you were saying that he woke up early and
Yeah.
shoveled coal. Like,
Yeah.
Nowadays, people aren't shoveling coal.
Right.
They don't have to wake up in the morning and chop wood unless they, unless
Yeah.
they have a wood burning stove or something like that. But like, just that extra effort, people now are like, oh man, that'd be crazy.
Right. Yeah. You kind of set the bar differently. Yeah. And I remember too, like that you could raise your hand to ask a question in class.
Oh yeah.
Seemed like such a bonus, because that didn't happen for a year.
Yeah. Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting. I wonder what it's like in Japan now. In class, I wonder if you can raise your hand.
I don't know. The way that they had that system set up, really is so different. So I told you they put their desks together, have lunch,
And then they separate them again.
Separate them again. Then when school's over, they put all the desks to one side of the classroom, and they swept and mopped, and then switched the desks over to the other
Every
side.
day.
Every day. So they didn't have a janitor. And the school was clean. So
Yeah.
it's just a different system, So
that's interesting because you hear a lot these days that they don't teach you enough practical life skills in school.
yeah.
Like
Mhm.
most of the things you're going to do, how do you do your taxes?
Yes.
And just anything you need to plan for when you're a young adult and you're trying to figure out how the world works and what the systems are. And in some sense, just teaching children to clean up after themselves and take responsibility is probably invaluable the rest of your life.
It probably helps their esteem also, just to feel
That's
like
an interesting idea.
Almost implement.
That's a really interesting idea. If you say like, there's all these services that schools have, right? And so they cost money.
Mhm.
Well, they don't have to cost money. The kids could just do it.
Yeah.
And the faculty could just do it and be like and if you spread it around the entire school and all the faculty, it would just be free and part of everybody's job.
Yeah. As long as you could get everybody on board. I think if you were to have some slacker students whose parents weren't gonna get on board about this, because there is a big cultural difference. Like if you had a slacker student and then that reflected badly on the whole family,
they would get on board.
Oh yeah. Whereas here, I think there's a little entitlement. Maybe there's going to be pushback and maybe some disrespect, right, from a certain portion of the student body and the parents. And so then, what are you going to do if somebody's not
kick them out of school? No, I'm just kidding.
But then you got to police all that.
Yeah.
Could you imagine having the juniors and seniors in a high school make them do the bookkeeping and file the taxes for the school?
Oh.
I mean, okay, so you're talking about a little bit more. I'm talking about just like little stuff like, well, I think it's little stuff like, okay, like Kyle, it's your day this month. You have to do it one day a month to take out the trash.
Right.
Okay, it's no big deal.
Right. It'd be good.
Right. And it'd be like just little stuff like that of like, okay, it's your day and the other 5 people's day to go sweep this area.
Sure, you could probably delegate almost everything in the school.
That's what I mean. And so like from a wild idea, like it'd be cool to like save a bunch of money on taxes.
Just a life skills class. And then
you just spread all this stuff out.
I don't know
how bad would it be to your kid if they ran the polisher on the wood floor in the gymnasium for the basketball court. It's like you use the basketball court, you're on the basketball team or volleyball team or whatever. Like, I don't know, a couple times a year you help polish the floor. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Then you know how to run a polisher. Yeah. Or whatever it is. Or like mow the lawns. Like you could have a whole class of like, lawnmower maintenance class.
I think you could do this in private schools. I think it'd be tough to do in a public school, you know?
Well, yeah, we'd have to change our system. It was just, I mean, we went on a rant. It was, I think it's a cool idea that we just came up with. Thank you.
Sure.
So what'd you do after high school? Or
So I went to Penn State University my freshman year, and then I changed my major. And when I changed my major, Penn State didn't offer what I was looking for at that time, and I was going to switch schools. And I had always wanted to come to the Northwest, and I had never been here. And I thought, well, maybe now's a good time. I have 3 years of school left, and I was on a scholarship, and I thought, I'll just get a kind of a secondary education in location. And so I'll just finish out those 3 years in the West. And so really sight unseen, I wrote to the University of Montana, and I got a letter back. And at that time, it was when they had like that burnt umber color, and it was kind of pretty bad looking stationery, but it was very friendly, and it came right away. And their return address was the lodge, and their tuition was a couple $1,000s cheaper as an out-of-state student than an in-state at Penn State. So I decided to come out, and I bought a Greyhound bus ticket, and I came out to Montana. And I thought I would really only be here for 3 years and go back, but I think now it's almost 40 years that I've been here. So So anyway, so I came out to the University of Montana, and while I was a student there, I took a gap year, and I went to Mexico and volunteered at an orphanage down there for 4 months.
Where in Mexico?
So an hour south of Mexico City, there's a town called Cuernavaca. It's also known as the City of Eternal Spring. And that's where the headquarters were. And then another hour south.
Headquarters for?
This orphanage. So the orphanage is called Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos. And it's a unique orphanage because...
I've heard of this.
Yeah. It's unique because those children aren't up for adoption. And so how it works is if you're an orphan there, they'll take care of you. And then I think after junior high school, so the high school years aren't guaranteed, but if you're a person who would like to go to high school, after junior high school, you do a year of service back to the orphanage. So maybe you take a job working in the garden or raising the animals, or you're taking care of preschoolers or mopping the floor or whatever you're doing. And if you do a year of service, then you get your high school education. And then if you want to go on to like a trade school or to college, then you do another year of service. If they put you through college, and for example, the dentist of that at that orphanage was a kid who had been a orphan and went all the way through dental school, and then came back and then would give dental service to the other kids that were there. So there was exchange like that. So anyway, so I went.
That's another good system.
Yeah, that was kind of neat. And their rationale for not adopting the kids out was they felt that when kids get older, or if you have a certain handicap, or you're maybe not as cute, you're always getting left behind, and the younger, healthier, cuter person gets adopted. And they thought that was just bad. It's like bad for kids. So they said, no, it's like, this is your family. This is your home now. So they had 2 haciendas that had been donated. So one was for girls and one was for boys. And they would just bus the girls to the boys' hacienda for school and for, events and stuff like that. And they had quite a few, maybe 7 international volunteers at a time. And we would have our own apartment. And then they would just put us in charge of different things. So I lived down there for 4 months and spent a summer up in Alaska, worked on a tour boat that took people out on like full day tours out of Seward. And so the full day tour would take you out to like calving glaciers, and there would be, whale watching and all that. And the half day tours were in Resurrection Bay. And so there would be, all the bird life and otters. And the cool thing about that job was being with a lot of people with gray hair who had saved for years and waited for retirement. And this was their dream. And they finally were there. And so that was just very enjoyable to be a deckhand. And, you're expected to know, something about the wildlife. And so you can answer questions.
Yeah.
But that was really enjoyable. So anyway.
Do Do you know, or have you thought about what compelled you or why you wanted to go volunteer in Mexico?
Yes. So when I left Japan, I had gotten very close to that family, but when we were standing on the train at this train station, and I was going to depart for the year, I mean, I was crying. I just knew I was going to miss them a lot, and they were absolutely stoic, which was culturally appropriate for them. Yeah. But it kind of shocked me. It kind of shocked me, like how flat their affect was. And I remember when I was flying back across the ocean, I thought, oh, if I ever get a chance to travel abroad again, I would really like to travel to like a Latin country where people's emotions are like right out there, you know, and just to experience the other side of that. You know?
Essentially the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because their culture is so focused on family and music and connection, and essentially the exact opposite.
Yeah. And so, and it took me 5 years to get through my undergraduate. And in addition, I took a year off after my fourth year, you know, and I just really wanted to take a break from school. And so I thought, oh, this is something I can do. And I just went to the library, looked up volunteer opportunities. This caught my eye. And they have a sister school in Yarnell, Arizona, that's an English-speaking school. So that, for example, if you were an orphan there and there was something in your future that was going to require proficiency in English, then you might be able to go to this school in Yarnell. Cool. You know, so I could, during spring break, I was able to go kind of check it out, like get a feel for what's the personality of this orphanage and the school, like, you know. And so I just drove down there over spring break and was able to talk to people that were familiar with it.
This was in Arizona.
In Arizona.
Yep.
And so then the next school year, I just went down there in the winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about that? Did you have any big takeaways, from that culture, from that experience?
You know, I really loved it. I felt like it was like some of my happiest times being down there. And it was my first time without a winter. And I got to say, I really liked it. I mean, I loved that there was like flowers blooming and, you know, sunshine and warmth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Yeah.
And then Alaska, that was a job or volunteering?
No, that was a job. That was just a way to be able to have the experience to go to Alaska. And, you know, it's just like during college, just you need to earn some money. And again, it was sort of like killing two birds with one stone. Like, I'd love to see Alaska, and was just fortunate enough to get that job on the boat. So, yeah.
What did you study when you were?
So I have a degree in philosophy, but I knew so I'm a nurse, and I knew I wanted to become a nurse. So I took all the prerequisites for nursing at that time, and but graduated with a degree in philosophy, and then it was shortly after graduating with this degree that I woke up one morning and I realized, hey, I'm an adult now, and I could go work with Mother Teresa if I wanted, you know. So I saved money for a while, and my roommates got into my address book. They wrote to all my relatives behind my back, and they said, hey, Carol's trying to go to India. And so in case you want to support her in any way, feel free. And all of a sudden, I just started getting all these letters from aunts and uncles and cousins saying, hey, we hear you're going to go, and here's $100. And, you know, like this kind
Wait,
of thing.
How did your friends tell your family about it?
They got into my address book, and they just wrote to everybody in my address book and said, hey, Carol's saving money. She's trying to go to India. To work.
So your friends wrote letters.
I was going to tell, it'd be like if somebody got into your phone.
Except for that they hand wrote letters to your family.
They did. And I didn't.
You wouldn't do that for me.
Yeah.
Hey, man. If it was a different era, maybe I would have.
And I didn't realize like what I thought. Well, did my mom, like, how did this happen? Like,
all of a sudden you just start getting money.
And then one of my cousins wrote to me. He said, it must be
really
amazing to have friends that would do that for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
super.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like dumbfounded.
I'd have ChatGPT write the email for me when I got into your phone.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah. So
sorry,
anyways,
continue.
Yeah. So anyway, so then I was able to go to India, and I stayed for 6 months, and that, I think that really was an amazing experience. I think I had pictured what it would be like. So before going to Calcutta, I had read that Mother Teresa said, hey, there's no need to go across the world to help somebody in your own backyard, you know, which that's valid. But I also really wanted to go to India. Like, not only that, but I just wanted to see India. And so I wrote so, and now it kind of boggles my mind how we could do any of this without the internet, but somehow I was able to get the phone number of Mother Teresa has a house in Washington, D.C., like a mission kind of house.
Mhm.
I was able to get that phone number. So I called that number in order to get the address that I could send a letter to Calcutta to ask permission to come, And so I got that address, and I wrote out a letter to Mother Teresa and said, hey, I know that you say stay home, help people, but I want to come to India anyway, and can I come volunteer?
Mhm.
And I actually got a letter back from her. And it's a really sweet letter. It says, by all means, come. And if you're thinking that you have a vocation, you can live with us. But if you're planning like just basically come here for a period of time and then go on with your life, here's a list of places that are inexpensive and they're safe and you can stay there. And what's really cute about the letter is it has like white out, she typed it, and there's like places where she made a mistake and typed. And I later found out that how that my letter got in her hands were when she's in Calcutta, they take the Daily Mail, and she sits at a desk like this, and she has one like head nun that's like her right-hand man kind of person, and they take the day's mail and they separate it into two piles, and then they answer those letters. And so mine just happened to be in her pile.
Mhm.
And so I
Right-hand nun.
yeah, exactly. And so then saved money for a while and then flew over to Calcutta. And the thing that I was really concerned about when I went was getting from the airport to the mother house. It felt like, oh, you're so green, and you don't know how much things cost, and
Yep.
somebody could really take advantage of your ignorance. So that was my only worry, really. And when I was waiting in line at the airport to have my passport stamped, I saw on the other side of the glass, the missionaries of charity wear a sari that's white with like two blue stripes on it. It's pretty distinctive. And I saw there were, like 4 missionaries of charity just sitting there. And I thought, oh man, if they're still there when I get through this line, I'm going to go introduce myself and just tell them that I'm here to volunteer. And they were there. And so I went over and talked to them, and they said, oh, we came here to pick up some priests that were to fly in from Rome, but they missed their connection and they're not coming. Why don't you come with us instead?
Okay.
And so this was great. So we went out the back door of the airport, and so they don't drive, they hire a driver, and their car is their ambulance. So we all hop into the back of their ambulance. We're just sitting on those bench seats. And I just couldn't believe it. I felt like, wow, this is really a dream come true.
You got a free ride.
And I'm like with the people I want to be with, and I'm safe, and like
Yeah.
it's amazing. So and we're driving through the streets of Calcutta, and at the time, that would have been in like 93. Calcutta is a city that was built for 3 million, and there were 13 million people. So it is very
Packed.
crowded, and there's oxen in the streets, and there's bicycle carts and buses and taxis, and there's no I guess there would be catalytic converters, or there's this
no
black
mufflers
smoke belching out of vehicles, and and it used to be a British colony, so it has like this beautiful old architecture that's kind of decaying, now, and just lots of sights and sounds and colors, and so I was just in the back of their ambulance traveling with them through these streets, and it seems hard to believe, but they broke out in song. Like I'm not joking. And they're just like so joyful. And we stopped at an orphanage on the way to the mother house, and they needed to go to a meeting. And so they brought me into this room, and it was like just rows of these metal crib beds, and each one, they had a little baby, and they just picked up a crying baby. They just handed it to me, and they said, here, Carol, just here's this baby, and we have this meeting. And so I was just like, trying to console this baby. I just like had gotten off of this flight, and so it was quite an introduction. And then when I went, I was really hoping to work in the original home that she founded, which was the home for the destitute and the dying. But since that time, she has lots of homes in Calcutta. Like there's a leper colony, there's a home for unwed mothers, there's of course an orphanage, and there's things like this. So I just thought, well, I'm here for about 6 months and I'll just work wherever they tell me to work. And so I get to the mother house and, they give you those little monkey bananas and some chai. And they said, well, how long will you be here? And I said, 6 months. And they said, well, would you mind? We'd really like it if you would work at the home for the destitute and the dying. So it was just my wish, and then they said I'd be doing them a favor if I would do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then
Mm-hmm.
I got to do that. And
what was your motivation for doing that?
Well, from that second grade teacher who always said, like, here's an example of somebody who really takes the gospel to heart, and she lived it.
Mm-hmm.
She really
No, but where did you get the motivation? You said you wanted to work with the destitute and dying.
Oh, why did I do that?
Yep.
Well, again, maybe it was the so at the time I was 25 and hadn't really ever been around not too much illness,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
poverty, death, nothing like that. And I felt like I want to, I don't know, like be as helpful as I can, or I don't know, like just try to help.
Okay.
Just try to help, maybe.
Yeah.
And I guess like an orphanage, that would be fine. But I spent a lot of my teen years babysitting, and I did work in an orphanage in Mexico. Like I feel like I know how to do that well. And so it's like almost like
it's a different experience.
A growing experience, like something, that's going to challenge me,
Yep.
And so I did work there for 6 months, and I would say the biggest takeaways. So their mission is actually not to save lives. It's not to save souls. It's they want to show compassion to each person. And so when they're, like really the criteria to get in there is they're picking you up off the street. You don't have any resources and you don't have anybody, And so these people, they're starving to death. A lot of them have like open wounds, and so they send the ambulance out. People call and say like, hey, there's somebody here on the sidewalk, and, and they'll go and they'll find that person and bring them in. And just through
that's what
meals,
the ambulance is for.
That's what it's really for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, just through regular meals, nutrition, nowadays about 80% of the patients there walk out. That's really that they just needed like time for their bodies to recover. They'll give them vitamins, but they don't really. They're not
They
give
them a place to rest.
Yeah, and their main mission. So I'm definitely an efficient person. I'm very task oriented, and it's easy for me to take care of a lot of things well. And the thing that I really need to know to do is to like stop and like look at the person and like really address that person, like that they're seen and that they're valued. Like that's really what their mission is that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like to see Christ in each person and like to treat them as if that was Christ. And how would you care for that person,
Mm-hmm.
And so that, many times a day when I was there, I would have to like do a mental check and say to myself, like slow down, just really like take care of that person's right in front of you. And of course you're still being efficient. You're still taking care of their needs, but really you're just trying to, show compassion.
Yeah. So you were kind of like having to adjust to being like a taskmaster master to, hey, just like relax for a second, slow down and spend, I don't know, maybe it might even be 30 seconds. But
absolutely.
Spend 30 seconds with somebody.
Yeah.
And then you can move on to the task.
Exactly that. So that's a huge like thing that continuously, I need to
good reminder.
learn that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, so that was, I had dreamed about going there for a lot of years, and it far exceeded my expectations. And the other thing I really noticed so in Calcutta, there are about 200 missionaries of charity, those sisters, right? And with one exception, I thought that those women were the most joyful people I had ever met. And it was consistent over the 6-month period I was there. And I think that the secret to that for them was, they own 2 saris, 1 pair of sandals, a metal bucket.
What's a sari?
That's what Indian women wear. It's like a really long piece of cloth that like wraps around,
okay.
right? But they would have one to wear and one to wash.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what the bucket was for. And even where they slept in just a huge room that had cots. And every so often the head nun would say, okay, switch. And so that you just have to get into a different cot. And so that you wouldn't even have like a mentality of territoriality. Like, hey, this is my bed by the wall or by the, you have no ownership of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And also you don't have your own agenda. Like what your goal is for today is to go and wherever you are, see Christ and whoever you're, if it's a child or a leper or a dying, destitute person, you just only doing that. And they were the most joyful people I have ever encountered.
That's interesting.
They're free of like all that, like ego and agenda and all that, So, and I really think it's a calling. Like I don't have that calling, but if I did have that calling, I would consider myself very lucky.
Sure.
Because really they were the most free people, it was beautiful.
Cool.
Like they literally seemed like lights in the darkness to me. Like when I was around them, it was impressive. So, yeah.
I got a question for you. So you said you wanted to work there because of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing when you went to Japan, you wanted the challenge of the opposite culture.
Yeah.
And have you ever just sort of thought about where that comes from or why do you think it's just a personality thing? Is it an upbringing thing? Yeah,
hard to say. It's probably a personality. I would say that my mom was maybe a little frustrated because even as a little child, I was really independent and I just really didn't want anybody's help with anything, which was probably not the best trait in your youngest child, that you probably just would like to cuddle or something. And I probably was just like not having it. Like I really wanted to like move on and be independent and do things, so anyway, yeah.
What do you think, like things you use now, or do you remember like specific things that your parents taught you, your mom or dad, either directly or indirectly, that kind of shaped your life in this sort of trajectory of these experiences you put yourself through?
Well, they were very encouraging, and I think, I think they just like never really gave me advice very much. They just kind of allowed me to make decisions, and then were supportive, and then I think that at least at the time when I was growing up, like my grandmother, for example, she was very poor, but she would send what money she had to like different missionaries, like that had schools in the Philippines or in Africa or whatever, It's like she was always really interested in supporting people that had much less, with healthcare or with education. And so I'm sure that had a big influence on my thinking.
So where'd you go from there?
So when I was in Calcutta, my best friend in Montana, she wrote me a letter and she said, "Hey, Carol, I met the perfect man for you." She said, "He's this Irish Catholic from the East Coast. He's from a family of 7, which I am too. You just really got to meet him." And I thought I wasn't going to meet him at all because on my way to India, I interviewed at Columbia in New York City. I was going to go to a 3-year nursing program there. And I was accepted actually when I was in India. And I couldn't afford it. And anyway, I ended up coming back to Montana, and I did meet Barry Flanagan, that's Tyne's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so we had a family. And so that's really what happened next, is that we basically became domestic. We settled down, and we had 3 children. We homeschooled.
You went to nursing school then in Montana?
Yeah. So at the time we lived up in Dayton, which is on Flathead Lake.
Okay.
And the closest nursing school was at Salish Kootenai College on the reservation. So my prerequisites were going to run out. So we already had our kids, but my prerequisites were going to run out, and I never wanted to repeat chemistry again. So I got myself back in nursing school and was able to finish that up.
Cool. Mm-hmm. And is Tyne's the oldest?
Yep, Tyne's the oldest. And then he has 3 years later, we had James.
Yep.
And then another 3 years, and we had McKenna.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Why homeschooling?
I think that both Barry and I felt we could really remember very clearly being in school and like the inefficiency, like feeling like we could be done with what we need to do, but we have to wait for the bell to ring at 3:15 to be released from class. Or we could remember the art of asking distracting questions in order to delay the teacher's agenda. And so, should we stop?
No, we're okay.
Um,
So you mean students would ask those questions to
right,
delay the
right? Do
Yeah.
you remember doing that? I mean, I remember doing that.
Yeah.
So we kind of felt like we could get the job done pretty, like say if we had 3 hours in the morning, and then the kids have the afternoon free to be outside and play, and when they're older to like take lessons in things that they're interested in.
Yep.
And so that was our primary motivation for that.
Interesting. So you guys thought,
It was kind of efficiency, I think, is the thing we thought.
yeah, but I guess the way that you're presenting it is like that you had that forethought that like, hey, this is inefficient for the kids.
Yeah.
And so, let's do it ourselves and homeschool them.
Yeah.
And you and Barry homeschooled them yourselves. Like you didn't.
We did.
Okay.
We had friends, by the way, too, that were homeschoolers. So
Okay.
it wasn't like that we were just in a vacuum thinking we're going to do that. We'd seen it done successfully.
Okay.
And
that was probably really important.
Oh yeah.
Because if you hadn't seen it done successfully, maybe you wouldn't have tried
dare.
it.
No, you wouldn't dare. But
wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it was very impactful. Like, as you know, the oldest child kind of takes the brunt of your maybe your ignorance or your neuroses as basically a first time parent, and a thing that happened with us for homeschooling that I think changed really the course in our family was, Tyne was very bright. He was just a great kid. And when I was teaching him how to read, he was having a little hard time with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember both of us getting pretty frustrated with that. Like me thinking like, well, if you tried harder or if you concentrated more, and him, like, I'm sure he was trying what he could and it just wasn't clicking.
Yeah.
And I just remember being, was frustrated. He was, frustrated.
Yeah.
I was frustrated. And I thought, wow, if this is like the beginning of homeschool and this is how it's going to go, this is not workable. We can't do that. And just like, so that day, just processing that in my mind, I thought like, we have to be on the same team. If it's not working for him, then it's not working for me either. You know what I mean? Like, then we can stop. Well, we can try this again in a few months, whatever it is, but we have to preserve our relationship. That has to be the first thing. You know what I mean? Because we live together 24 hours a day. You know what I mean? So it's got to be healthy.
Between you and Tyne.
Yeah. Like between, say, me and my kids now, like that, we can't have any kind of acrimony between ourselves. Like, we can't do that.
Okay.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so it just like flipped something in my mind where then it just changed it. And it became like, hey, we're on the same team. And so, we're going to work hard together. And if we're not understanding something, we're going to try different approaches. And if it's just not the time to learn it right now, then we're going to kick that can down the road and we'll do that later. But the main thing is what's the feeling in our house? You know what I mean? How are people feeling? You know what I mean? And how's our relationship with each other? And so it was really a transformative day, actually, at least in my heart, where.
So this is okay. Come on, let's dive into this for a second. So this is a real example?
Yeah.
Okay.
That happened.
So Tyne's having trouble reading.
Yeah.
And you guys are working at it.
Yeah.
And it's not working.
Right.
Okay. And so you say, okay, I'm going to change my approach and we're going to work on something else. And so you might work on something else for that day, but I would imagine like at some point you had to come back to the reading.
Yeah.
Right. And so was that a week later? Was it a month later? Was it a year later?
I'm sure it was within that year,
Mm-hmm.
but the main thing I guess that I recognized was like, there's no way he's going to be 15 and unable to read like that. Like, he's going to be able to read. So, but what
So he doesn't have to learn it
Yeah.
today or
Yeah.
this month,
Right.
or even in the next 6 months.
Right. And really, like, I recognize, it's a matter of my own pride. Like
So
I
interesting.
think that my son is so smart that he should be able to get this easily. And it kind of helps my ego, right? If he can, and then I can be like, oh, hey, time's already reading,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then I realize, like, well, that's not right. That's not right. Like, really what's happening is I'm like pushing this agenda on him. He's frustrated. I'm frustrated.
And you're pushing a timeline.
Yeah. And so then,
Like every kid learns by 6 years old or whatever, or 5 years old or whatever it is.
Yeah. Right.
So there's like this timeline that's in your mind.
Right. And thinking like, well, I know you're so smart. You know what I mean? Like that, which she is really smart, but it just wasn't the time for him to get the concepts that I was trying to show him at that time, and then, I mean, the beautiful thing that came out of that was like the letting go of that, like to say like, hey, you know what? It's not about my ego. And I'm going to shame him, like, in order for him to try to like meet my goals, like that's just going to backfire. Like that's not going to work. And so, so it became very helpful. I think it became much more like not an adversarial type of relationship, but that we were, friends and family and like a team. So, and then I think that helped inform all the years that came after. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think about my experience. I had a lot of trouble reading, and I did first grade twice, mostly because of reading or my lack thereof. And so doing first grade twice changed my experience my schooling for the rest of my life, because I was then, whether it was myself or kids or other teachers, like I was now not smart, right? And I was shamed, and I was self-shaming, and so when I would get picked on to read a sentence or a paragraph, I would tremble, and so then that kind of rippled into other subjects, and it was like, well, Kyle's not that great in school, and so it's interesting,
I can see that
because there's a timeline. You're like, well, if you can't do this by this time, well, you're not smart,
But really, if they just
hey man, if you want to go outside and play kickball, I'm going to kick the ball the farthest.
And honestly, that would have been a good answer. And like, come back when you're 9 and you're going to get this very easily. You know what I mean? And also then you have your self-esteem intact.
Sure.
Because, it's going to happen at different times.
Yeah. So there's a balance somewhere in the middle there. Yeah.
But it wouldn't happen by forcing somebody.
Right.
Sure. So you might as well, if it's just not the time, then just like move on to something else and go play outside.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, what do you value, right? Like somebody can, I don't know, play Scrabble or do a puzzle really well. And it's like, okay, well, one person values that versus, okay, that's worthless. Like, I don't care that you can put a puzzle together, right?
Right. So, there's all kinds of intelligence and so many.
Or somebody can play a musical instrument and somebody can't.
Right.
I was just talking to a buddy, and he was talking about he's got a young kid who's just learning how to walk. And he was like, yeah, I was worried, like they say by this age your kid should be walking. And I was thinking, oh God, this probably never ends.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, it's like, he's going to be able to walk.
Yeah.
Like, I can guarantee he's going to be able to walk. And by the matter of fact, he's going to be able to run.
Right.
Yeah. It's easy for me to look from the outside. But I get it. We're all humans and we all have egos. So you probably think, man, is he going to walk? Is it my fault? Am I raising him wrong?
You have to remind me of this when I have my first child.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell is wrong with this kid?
Yeah. Maybe if I train him to walk early, he'll be even faster than everyone else.
I think that's the mistake that you make as a parent.
Yeah.
You think that somehow it's going to advantage your child, but it happens, on its own.
I mean, that's what we were kind of talking about, you being the youngest of 7, because that's what I hear a lot is parents always try so hard with the oldest one because you don't want to mess it up. You want to give this kid a chance, and hopefully you can do all the things your parents didn't do for you, et cetera, et cetera. And then by the second or third, they're like, all right, this kid will figure it out. We'll figure it out. It's probably going to be okay. Just probably relax a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd rather just talk about other people having kids. I'm not going to try to have my own and master it.
Yeah.
What was that? I don't know where you guys, I jumped out for a second, but what was that whole experience like, homeschooling your kids? You gave them a choice of high school to some extent?
Yeah, actually, at any time. And so definitely by junior high school, Tyne was just so, it just so happened that the homeschool families that we were close to, it honestly seemed like mostly they had girls, at least at Tyne's age and James's age. And so I think he was just like wanting some buddies and wanting to know what school is like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing that they wanted to do was sports, which in Montana, you know, it's a all or nothing. You can't just like homeschool and then do school sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so Tyne started, I think, in 8th grade. And then I think within weeks, his younger brother, James, wanted to go to school. So then he went to public school, I think, in 6th grade. And then McKenna, she was only in 3rd, but really, I think what she really wanted to do was wear a backpack, you know, but she wanted to go to school. So she went to school for a year and a half to public school.
She just wanted to wear a backpack.
I thought so. I mean, it's the style, you know, leaving for school. And so the boys, once they started public school, then they went the whole way through. But for McKenna, she's very musical, and she kind of realized, like, when she enjoyed school, but she also thought that it took all the time that she had, you know, like she had to wake up before she's ready, get ready for school, come home, you know, have a snack, do homework, take a bath, have dinner, get to bed. You know what I mean? Like, and so pretty soon she just wasn't doing music at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so after about a year and a half, she just asked if she could come back to homeschool. And so she did. And then she did homeschool co-op for high school. And then the community college in Kalispell has a running start program. And she was actually able to start that at age 15. So then she took college classes for basically her junior and senior year. So all 3 kids did different things. But I really treasured the grade school years. I mean, it was, such a treat to be able to like be with your kid when they're like learning how to read and like learning math, and just to have all that extra time, because really the years go so quickly. It was just nice to have them close by. And so it was really valuable.
My mother, she homeschooled me and my siblings, and sort of similar trajectory. I never went to public school at all. All my siblings did, kind of anywhere from, I think my older sister, she might have gone in 7th or 8th grade. And then somewhere my brother might have went in 6th grade. My little sister might have gone in 6th or 7th, somewhere in there. I never did, but my mother she said to us on the podcast, when she held her firstborn son in her arms, she knew she wasn't going to let somebody else raise this kid. And I think just having her kids around and being able to, I don't know, it's something I think about a lot now, just because I look back on my experience. And then we talked with Serini, a colleague, friend of
from India,
Kyle's from India, and he was homeschooling his kid. I don't know what his long-term plan is, but that was sort of, from my experience, is the being homeschooled is like probably one of the best experiences, but I also would have liked the more social exposure and just to be more comfortable talking with people. Ironically, I'm doing a podcast right now, but so it's, I don't know, there's a lot of nuanced thought to it, but I think I think most kids like are really happy for the experience, but it's also case dependent because people vary so widely. Yeah.
And also depends on how solo you go. Like, I think that you can find other homeschooling families, and you can find kind of different group activities potentially.
Yeah, we were always able to play sports. I played a lot of sports growing up, even though I was homeschooled. So
that's cool.
I had a good network of friends and stuff outside of the home and the farm. But yeah, it was overall very good experience.
Yeah, that's good.
So what did you learn from it? What did it teach you?
Well, the main thing that we were just talking about was that, like, I guess, to approach your family as your team. You know what I mean? That it's like, you're never like versus one another, but you're like moving forward together. You know what I mean? And that's the only way that you can move forward, right? So I think that was my main takeaway. and it was pretty impactful, I think, as far as like our relationships then.
What happens when, what happened? How did you handle that when you really got into it with maybe one of the kids or your husband, where you guys disagreed and strongly,
Mm-hmm.
or you felt that maybe maybe you wanted something different and you weren't getting it?
Well, I mean, you know that Barry and I did get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
so, so we were like a very unusual homeschool family because, well, at least in our area, a lot of the homeschool families were evangelical,
Mm-hmm.
and we definitely were not. And also, we were divorced, which that was unusual. But it's not quite answering your question. But Barry and I did parent well together. I mean, I think that we both we thought about our kids' well-being in a similar way,
Mm-hmm.
and we were supportive of one another in that way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So, yeah. And then I guess we really didn't, as far as like, I can maybe only think of a couple instances, maybe when the boys were in high school, where, where there had to be maybe some pretty strong disagreements, maybe about some choices. And I don't
Well,
know.
maybe it was in between you and the kids, but you kind of you had said, hey, look, like we're gonna move forward as a team. This isn't like you're not a dictator kind of a thing. You weren't going to dictate to them what they were going to do or not do.
You mean as far as a curriculum?
Yeah.
Well, there still was expectation. So, for example, you have this math curriculum and it's age appropriate. And, as long as the child is understanding the concept, I mean, they're still responsible for getting, whatever, this page done or this worksheet completed before they're going to go do something else.
Yeah.
Right. Like be free, And I think we would just talk about that a little bit too. Like, well, I mean, you can have a choice. You can like concentrate and get it done and be free, or we can kind of like sit here at the table and kind of look at it in a slow way. You know what I mean? Like, so
just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kyle, you met McKenna. We had dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's freakishly smart.
Super smart.
It's intimidating.
She's way too smart. she's way too mature too.
Yeah.
Well, did you find with homeschooling that was a bit of a problem? I feel that homeschool children are pretty mature because they're hanging around with people of all different ages.
Yeah, so there's a family of 8 that our family's pretty close with. There's 5 brothers and 3 sisters. And then, yeah, I swear, like all 8 of them freakishly smart. Huge variations in my family. We grew up on a farm, so myself and my little sister, we had just much more like tendencies to want to do farm work and do that. And then I'd say my older sister and youngest brother have more of an academic tendency. But yeah, it's like I think I learned a lot of different skills, more like life skills and practical things on the farm. But like the academic stuff, other than math, which I was always very strong with, I had really little interest in it.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. I mean, it's like a lot of room in life for such a variety of things. And I think that's the beauty of homeschooling.
Yeah. Yeah. The family I'm speaking of, one of the oldest brothers, he was our veterinarian on the farm. And he was like, him and his siblings, they were doing like college courses when they were 15 and graduating from vet school when he's 23.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I apologize, but I got to wrap this up.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was great.
It's great to talk with both of you. Thank you.
This was great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.